Hello, everybody,
Yo,
and welcome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the presenters series for the IACT IMDHA HypnoExpo coming up on the 21st through the 23rd of May with pre and post conferences before and after. We are here tonight to interview some of the presenters of those programs, and in particular, we're going to be talking with Peter Blum. I'm going to let my friend Karen Hand here take over and introduce you to Peter.
I'd be delighted to. I just love Peter Blum. He's the coolest guy in the room. Well, he's the coolest guy in the room. There may be other women who are cooler, but he's the coolest guy in the room every time. And Peter's had a full-time practice in hypnosis for 30 years. It's pretty amazing. He is a pioneer in the field of sound healing and is an ordained interfaith minister. His teachers have included Dr. Ann Linden, Dr. Steve Carter, Dr. Ernest Rossi, Beautiful Painted Arrow, and Dr. Louis Mel Madrona. I have a feeling we're going to be hearing about them in a little bit. He was awarded Hypnotist of the Year in 2015 by the IACT, and in 2018 was recognized as Life Fellow in Hypnotherapy by IMDHA. I find it fascinating that Peter actually lives in Woodstock. And he dresses for the part as well. So how does that a hippie like you get into hypnosis?
Oh, you need to open up.
Did I unmute?
There you go.
Well, okay. There's a that's what we call there's a presupposition within that that I am a hippie, and
Yes, that's
I guess. Thank you for that. I guess I would never deny it, but I might not identify as that these days. So what was your question?
How did you find hypnosis?
How did I find it? You know, the Mel Brooks. You know Mel Brooks, right? Everybody knows Mel Brooks, and there's a wonderful skit from a long time ago where he was riffing with Carl Reiner, and he was a cowboy psychiatrist in this particular skit. And apparently they made a lot of this stuff up as they went along. And Carl Reiner said to him, "Tell me, sir, you're a cowboy psychiatrist. How did that happen?" And Mel Brooks goes, "Well, I was riding along on the range one day and mending fences, and I got off my horse and I knelt down. The sun was high in the sky. There was a big rock there. I put my hand on the rock. I took off my 10-gallon hat. I looked up at the sky. I said, 'By God, I am a psychiatrist.'" How does one ever become anything? One finds what's interesting. I often encourage my clients to follow your passion, whatever it is, and my friends, whatever it is that you're interested or curious about. By following your passion, the universe, your destiny unfolds. And I've done a bunch of different things over the years, but in 1985, I was working for a newspaper as a journalist, and my friend Richard Zarrow, whom I had known from earlier in Woodstock when we used to do various unmentionable things together. And Richard had gone off to California and came back and opened an office. And I went to interview him for the newspaper because that's what I was doing at the time. I was a journalist. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing Ericksonian hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming." And I had never heard of either of them, but I was curious and I interviewed him. And in the course of being interviewed, I was doing a series at the time of interviews with people who were doing, at that point, 84, 85, were called alternative. They weren't mainstreamed yet. And I was wanting to introduce our neighborhood to things like acupuncture and chiropractic and Rolfing, and which now everybody knows about, but at that time they didn't. But I'd never. And one of the perks of doing this series was that I got to experience each modality. So, so I could write about it firsthand. So I was Rolfed and acupunctured and chiropracted, and Richard had this chair called the getaway chair. And it was, you know, it was one of these recliners that sat, rollers that went up and down the acupuncture meridians on either side of your spine, and your calves were vibrated, and there were speakers that came around, and you put a cassette player in with a double induction, which I didn't know what it was. Later I learned it was a double induction. I think it may have been Changeworks, Tom Condon and Carol Erickson, or it might have been hypnoperipheral processing. Anyway, it's two, for those who don't know, it's two people talking, telling two different stories, one in each ear. I had the headphones on here, no, these speakers, and then he put on an early prototype of the alpha theta brainwave machine, you know, with goggles and headphones. And they put out pulse, light, and sound. And then he left the room. And he came back in 20 minutes later and unhooked me. And I was like Woody Allen in that, where he comes out of the orgasmatron, you know, in that movie. I was like, whoa, that was great. Is that what you're talking about? He said, yeah. I said, but you didn't do anything. He said, exactly. and Richard had studied with John Grinder, and whom I found out later that you know, it's just like a hierarchy of people that, you know, so and so studied with so and so who studied with the guy who sat next to Erickson or whatever. So this, you know, he was fairly close to the source, but he took a lot of it and he incorporated it with Zen meditation and Scientology, which he had been involved with, and quantum physics, and a lot of spirituality, the writings of Teilhard de Chardin, the James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, and he had a global frame. And it was interesting because this guy, before he had a turnaround, people used to say he had the most fully developed apocalyptic vision of anyone they had ever met. He was like Chicken Little running around, the sky's falling, visions of doomsday scenarios. But he had an awakening, and in that moment, he realized if we can have instantaneous destruction, we can have instantaneous enlightenment. And that Teilhard de Chardin talks about the omega point, which is a projected time when instead of a handful of enlightened individuals, we suddenly reach quantum mass and half the world wakes up blissed out. So that was his hope, that he could ignite enough candles that would go out and light other candles. So he was really driven by this wanting to turn the world around, and one by one, right? And it was very inspiring. And I loved the experience, and I wrote about it. And about a year later, I was at one of those turning points in one's life where you have reached the ceiling, you know. And for those who know the metaphor of the frog in the water, it's I had worked for 12 years as a journalist, and what had started out as a very tolerable situation had slowly become intolerable. So the metaphor there is, if you take a frog and put it in a pan of water and slowly heat the water, the frog will boil to death. If you take a frog and throw it into a pan of water that's already boiling, it will jump out. So I was slowly, you know, boiling to death. And I said to Richard at one point, because we were friends outside of writing about this article, I don't know what to do. I'd like to jump, but I don't know where to jump to. And he said, well, why don't you do what I do? I think you'd be good at it, and I'll train you in it. And while you're training, I need someone to run my office for me, and I'll pay you to manage the office. And my practice is going so well that as soon as you're ready, I'll start funneling clients to you. And I said, well, this sounds like the proverbial offer I can't refuse. So that was in 85. So it's actually been 35 years now that I've been doing this. And I never looked back, because I used to tell people, I was in my late 30s at the time, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And this was it. I was like, okay, thank you. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, Creator. And Richard used to say that, you know, we are so blessed. We have a threefold goal, which is to have fun, to help change the world into a better place, and to make money. And we're so blessed because we can do all of those things. And I think it's important for me, at least, to keep it in that order. It needs first, it's got to be about me. It's got to be about me enjoying myself and having fun. Because, you know, I was almost tempted to say, after hearing Melissa, you know, speak, you know, what she said. Because so many of the things that Melissa said, I agree with completely, that this is it's contagious. When we're enthusiastic about something, it's contagious. And Richard was so enthusiastic about what he was doing, and I got that from him. And I think I was used to be much more of a kind of low key guy, and I can still go into that kind of, you know, quiet, disappearing in the back of the room thing when it suits me. But I also learned how to get into active presentation mode, how to let my enthusiasm come forth. And, you know, I love playing with words and taking them apart and putting them together. And enthusiasm, actually, you may know this, Michael, comes from entheos, to be filled with God, to be filled with spirit. So that's a wonderful thing to think about. When we're enthusiastic, it's just overflowing. So I love what I do. And I've been teaching, you know, for 28 years. So, and training other people in hypnosis. And I love coming to the conference. And I often do something that's a little bit outside the box, you know, because I'm interested in shamanic work and how that correlates with hypnosis. I'm interested in sound and music, and I've done workshops, and I'll be doing the Friday night free, you know, part of the all included part of the conference, my sound bath, which is my gift every year. But this year I thought, well, let me do something that's really maybe more easily grokkable by people who are looking for something that, oh, here's something I can take and plug in immediately. And so the topic that I chose was conversational hypnosis. And I'm also be doing a 2-hour on Sunday, which is covert verbal and nonverbal inductions, which is basically the same thing, kind of, except a little bit different. I mean, it's more or less the same thing.
So Peter, you mentioned, by the way, I'm getting the feedback that I'm getting. The microphone is something weird here. Are you all right?
Your microphone.
Yeah, you're all fine hearing me? Okay, so earlier, I mean, conversation hypnosis being your topic, and earlier you mentioned the name of my greatest mentor I can help you, which is Tom Binder, the linguist behind it all. Wondering, as I said earlier, they come from Noam Chomsky, deep structure and informational grammar.
Yeah, deep.
Michael.
Yes.
Is this cool enough?
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
Well, you're echoing back at me too. So let's let Peter go ahead.
I'm pretty good at reading lips, and I think you were saying something about your favorite guy, John Grinder, whom I mentioned. And what's all this I hear about transformational grammar and the deep structure? And those are you know, Richard, even though he was very well versed in neurolinguistic programming, and he incorporated it, and often when he was training me, I didn't know whether this was an Ericksonian technique or an NLP technique. And he often didn't bother to distinguish. But he had these books on his shelf, you know, Patterns, Volume 1 and 2, and The Structure of Magic, Volumes 1 and 2. And I was curious about all that stuff. And he would talk about, you know, I had mentioned earlier what he said, you know, why don't you do what I do? Because you'd be good at it. And I stopped and I said, that's very flattering, but why do you say I would be good at it? And he said, well, your mind already works that way. He said, the unconscious is the domain of puns. idioms, double entendres, jokes. And, you know, that's how I think. Swami Beyondananda, whom some of you may know, who's going to be actually doing the keynote, I believe, or the entertainment on Saturday night, the great Swami Beyondananda. I went to a workshop of his one time because he's a very funny guy. And I'm a funny guy, but I always want to see if I can learn some more funny stuff. And he gave this workshop and he said, it's not about being funny. It's about seeing funny. That you kind of put on, you know, these glasses that you see things differently. You look at the world differently, and other people see an act, you know, somebody falling and hurting themselves. You see slapstick. You know, it's a maybe that's a bad example, but you know what I'm saying. So I hear funny. I don't see funny. I hear funny. I'm an auditory kinesthetic person, and I always, like Erickson said, that he, looking back, realized he was always perceiving and communicating multi-level. And I'll do that. Someone will say something and I'll hear a word within a word, or a phrase within a phrase, or a way that it can be turned around. And so it's amazing that we actually can communicate at all, human beings. We're, you know, and we're basically apes with clothes on, who are barking and grunting at each other, you know, and yet it's a consensual reality that we've agreed upon. And so you know, here's kind of the way it goes. I have a thought in my mind, and that thought, now because I'm a language user and I've been trained to use the English language, I find words that express this concept. And then, because I learned to talk as a kid, which was a whole other thing, right? And we take that for granted. But you know, we think in sentences, and they just come out, right? We think in full sentences, and they come out. And so, because of that, I can take these concepts and find the words, and then string them together into a grammatically correct sentence, and then find the muscles in my mouth and my tongue that will form them and make these sounds. And then those sound waves travel through the air. They travel through the air to the inner ear of everyone here who's listening, except it's traveling through the electronic medium. But if you're in the room with me, it'd be traveling through the air and hit your ear, which then takes those sound waves and translates them through the incredible mechanism of the inner ear, which there's stirrups and anvils and all kinds of stuff in there. And it translates those into the words that are the same words as the ones I used, and that hopefully will allow you to have some of the same thoughts and concepts that I was attempting to communicate to you. So that's rather miraculous. Does that answer your question about the deep structure of language? No. All right. So NLP talks about deletions and distortions and generalities, which is it's a useful catch-all phrase that we don't really get the full, we get a surface level most of the time of what someone is saying, but underneath that are layers of deeper layers of meaning. And so listening for and being able to hear those is one of the things that we need to be trained to do, but also to be able to communicate in ways that bypass conscious resistance. And establishing rapport, of course, is first and foremost. We all need to find ways to make ourselves user-friendly, right? No, I mean, unless you're Richard Bandler, who likes to insult people, and then they come back to him for more sessions. But I mean, that's another thing. For most of us, we want to learn to use language, and one of the words that NLP I heard bandied about a lot in the early days was elegance. To be elegant with your use of language, that there's a certain grace to it, that we can use it in a refined manner. So when I was with Richard, and his influence on me still stays. Like, he was committed to teaching all of his clients self-hypnosis. And he said, because on some level, really, uh, on some level, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. Although many would argue, well, but what about the politicians in Madison Avenue where we're being hypnotized outside of our awareness? That's not self-hypnosis. But for the sake of therapeutic change, we could hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And beyond that, he was committed to not developing another dependency. A lot of forms of long-term therapy and work are based on a model where you create a framework like, oh, you'll have to come in for 10 sessions or 20 sessions, or it'll be years of work. And Richard was like, no, we want to empower our clients. We want to, and he used that old adage, if I catch a fish, I feed you for a day. If I teach you how to fish, I feed you for the rest of your life. So he had developed a 3 to 6 session model of teaching people step by step what he called future shaping, which is a form of hypnotizing and visualization, and involved quantum physics that you're giving people some scientific, like Melissa was saying. It's nice, to say, and look, here's a book that explains what the science is behind this. Like, that there actually are now many who believe that there are an infinite number of parallel realities. And this has always been around in mystical thinking, but now quantum physics says this. And so there are an infinite number of possibilities that branch out from every second that we walk through life. Every time we make a choice, it creates another fork. And so, is it possible through being congruent, like knowing your outcome and resolving any conflicting things that may be getting in the way of you getting it, and really fervently believing that you can have it, to the point that you visualize yourself repeatedly in the future having that? Can we in fact tune ourselves in to that branch of that possible future? And I know I'm going a little bit far afield here, but do you have any other questions for me?
Well, I have. So you do all of these, and Michael, I think you keep this mic. There we go. Now we go. So you do all of these things, Peter. You do covert hypnosis, and you do nonverbal hypnosis, or the visualization, and you do overt hypnosis. Aren't we all just hypnotizing each other all the time? All of us just hypnotizing over and over? And we'll have to unmute you again.
Yeah. If you and your husband are having a discussion about what shall we do tonight, right? And you say, there's a great new restaurant that's opened up, and now that you can go out, right? And there's a great new, and I've heard that the food is fabulous there, and I'd really love to go there. And he says, well, there's limited seating now at this club where they have live music, and they're spacing people out and making socially distanced, and there's a wonderful musical group playing there tonight, and I was kind of thinking that would be good for us to do that. Well, wherever you end up going, that person was the better hypnotist, right? I mean, it's all about suggestion, the art of making suggestion, the art of influencing. And some people say, well, isn't that kind of sneaky if you're doing it outside of their awareness? And I said, look, if somebody is coming to my office, if I stop people on the street and tried to do stuff like that, yeah, it would kind of be like, he's always trying to be slick, or he's a con man, or he's trying to get over on us. But if people come to my office and they say, can you help me? And they say, here's some money to do it, I figure I've got carte blanche, as long as my intentions are good, to first do no harm, and that I have no agenda other than to help them get their goal, that all bets are off. I can use any trick in the book. One of the when I teach my students about many different induction techniques, I say one of my favorites is to put myself into trance. Right, as I am listening to them and as I'm talking to them, and in the pre-talk, and while I'm digesting and letting my unconscious come up with what it's going to do, I realize that I do my best work when I'm in trance. And even now, as we're talking, and I'm trying to think of what else I could say now, it may be already happening. And it's very easy because you're not pushing someone into something. You're saying, look, here I am. It's so pleasant. Why don't you come join me here? You're not actually saying that, but you're presenting um, a picture of deep relaxation and access to creativity. And so I often said, that there are we don't really pick, at least I don't pick a modality so much as I pick a person, that the practitioner is the modality, right? So it doesn't matter. There could be 6 people in my neighborhood who are doing chiropractic work, but I go to one of them. I may have tried a few of the others. I go to one of them because it's that person. It's I can't even put my finger on it always. It's just something about the way that they are. It's their beingness, right? We want to find teachers just like we want to find therapists that we want to, it feels good to be around, right? Because and so these ways of working with language. Oh, and the other thing that happened, which I got really excited about, was during this time of not having a lot to do. I mean, it started to pick up recently, but there was a period of time where I had more time on my hands than I'm used to. And so I thought I should have some projects. I should assign myself some projects. And one of them was um, I joined my friend Dr. Louis Melmadrona and his wife a few months ago. He's a psychiatrist who does, I've worked with a lot on narrative hypnosis and storytelling. And he's a psychiatrist of Native American heritage. He's part Cherokee and part Lakota. And he's a good friend and a mentor. And he was doing a 2-day Zoom seminar for the Open Center in New York. And I sat in the hotel room with him while he did it. And I was like, how are you going to fill up 2 full days? I mean, if I do a couple of hours on Zoom, I'm kind of like blown out sometimes, or used to be the case. And what he did was he had a whole PowerPoint presentation. And I'd never used PowerPoint. I was always sort of like intimidated by it. But I said, gosh darn it, I'm good enough and I'm smart enough and I'm going to go buy myself a Microsoft PowerPoint and teach myself to use it. And so I've prepared, I'm so proud of myself, I've prepared, and I had so much fun doing it, a PowerPoint presentation for the 1-day conversational hypnosis class. And my question to myself was, well, it's so good, should I maybe use it in the 2-hour one as well for people that won't get to the 1-day class? And if they do the 2-hour one and then they end up doing the 1-day class, well, they'll see it again and they'll probably learn stuff that they didn't learn the first time. What do you think?
Sure.
Yes.
Peter, I'm hesitating. I've got to tell you what we discovered about the microphones so that you understand what's happening. Is that when your microphone is open, it seems to be originating with your microphone. Then we get that echo. So you'll have to unmute and mute yourself at the appropriate times, and that'll work out. But absolutely, I'm interested in finding out. And you started to describe it. What's going to happen in your class? So if I sign up, I'm going to spend a day. What are we going to do? Are we going to do exercises? Or are you going to be lecturing? Tell me about it.
Yes, we'll be doing exercises. Yes, Karen. Yes. we'll be doing some sleight of mouth, and that's a term that I've heard. But explaining a concept. This is like watch one, do one, teach one is a formula that is often so if I can explain the concept and then demonstrate, and then since we have the luxury of breakout rooms, people, I can say, you two go over there, you two go over there, and you now you understand what embedded suggestions are, and so some use some embedded suggestions. You understand, I explained to you what conversational postulates are. So see if you can have a talk with this person where you use conversational postulates. You can both be hypnotizing each other and using tag questions. So to explain what all of these things are, and then to demonstrate them, and then to have people practicing them. I've often used the model of 4 stages of learning. And I think this is basic truism for anything that you're learning, is the first stage is unconscious incompetence. You don't know that you don't know, right? You never heard of conversational postulates, so you don't even know that you don't know what they are. And then you hear about it, and you go to you start reading, you go to a class, and you say, oh, I kind of got it, but it's a little awkward. I can't quite figure out how to fold these things in naturally. So you're then at the stage of conscious incompetence. You know what you don't know. First, you didn't know what you didn't know. Now you know what you don't know. Then, if you practice it for a while, you reach the 3rd stage, which is conscious competence. Okay, I know what I know. I can do this. You asked me to, use a tag question, and I can do that, can't I? Hopefully, we keep working at it, and it becomes so that it's not a technique anymore. It's just coming naturally. And that's the best of all. And at that point, we've reached unconscious competence. And so whatever you're learning to play the violin, or you're learning to roller skate, or you're learning to speak Russian, or you're learning conversational hypnosis, first of all, people, I hope, will realize that they already know quite a bit of this. They already use it. They may not be aware of it, but they already use it or may recognize it. They may have gotten bits and smatterings from here and there. And I was having fun seeing how much I could pack into one day. And of course, that includes storytelling, because I love storytelling. And my stories often do start out with once upon a time. Or
You are,
go ahead.
sorry. You are a phenomenal storyteller. And I know that plays into what you do to a great extent. To what extent is it about telling the stories or entrancing your listener with the stories?
Well, we are storytelling creatures, human beings. And like Louis Malmadrona, Dr. Louis Malmadrona, who was saying one native elder said to him, story's all there is. That's it. We're just, he said, and look, it's difficult to talk psychology to Lakota because they have no word in their language for self. It's like, what? That's really fascinating. He said the closest is the word hochoka. Hochoka means a swarm, like a swarm of bees. You, Karen, are a swarm of stories, right? I mean, and this touches on what Melissa was talking about too. She was using different terms and different words, more of the scientific plasticity and cognitive, whatever. I agree with what she said. I approach it slightly differently in that there are no, a core belief of mine is there are no bad people. There are just bad stories, right? And people carry these stories and they're so embedded in them that they don't even realize that they're doing it. So I need to listen to the client's stories, take them in, regurgitate them, refine them, question in a way that's allowing them to rewrite it, encouraging them to come up with a different storyline. And one of the ways that I do that is by telling them stories, because stories are covert induction. I mean, those are magical words, right? Once upon a time, everybody goes into like immediate age regression. So Erickson, I mean, I was amazed when I was working in Richard's office and he had all these books, on a shelf. And the first one that I took down was My Voice Will Go With You, which is the teaching tales of Milton Erickson. And there's a little, one paragraph, 2 paragraphs, half a page, dozens and dozens, maybe over 100 of these stories that Erickson used, and Sid Rosen went around, collected them from various family members and clients who had worked with or been around Erickson for years. And they're little anecdotes. And I read them and I said, Richard, this is amazing. Erickson had the perfect teaching story for just about every situation. And Richard said, yes. And nobody knows how many, if any of them, are true. And that was a big aha moment for me, because, I can tell a story that may be not literally true, but it is relatively true. It is not, or it's absolutely true where it is not literally true. So there's various levels of truth, and the greatest stories, the ones in the Bible, the ones in Aesop's Fables, Joseph Campbell, these are mythic stories, and every person is on a hero's journey of their own, right? And so to be able to tell a story that will inspire them, to get out of the bogmire, to find the, all right, anyway, enough about that. But stories are work 2 ways, and telling stories, one of the wonderful things that they do is they bypass conscious resistance, because the client has the ability to choose, like, what part of the story. It's not about you. I'm saying it's not about you. I'm telling a story about something that happened to my kid when he was little, or something that happened to a client I had. Oh, okay. So they can relax, and their unconscious can take what is relevant and apply it and discard the rest. And if it's too, if it's like, well, why did you say that story? And then I'll just back off and say, well, I don't know, it's just a story, so let's move on to something else. Because, one of the surefire ways to, kill a joke is to explain it, right? And one of the worst things you can do after you tell great metaphorical stories to sit down and break it down for the client bit by bit and analyze every bit. No, that's not going to work. So you just want to kind of weave it through, and that's a form of conversational hypnosis.
Peter, if I might mention, Richard Bandler was also certainly, or is also certainly, a teller of stories. And and with regard to Erickson, you said, I wonder how many of the stories are true. Certainly with Richard Bandler, this is the case, and he seems to have invented a persona for himself, and describes himself in situations, but uses so many stories that clearly are made up as ways of teaching. And I guess people, if they're really concerned about, I really want to get to know Richard Bandler and he isn't being authentic with me because he's making up all of this bullshit, well, then I'm sorry, you'll be disappointed. But the nature of the relationship is I'm not here to know about Richard Bandler. I'm here to learn about some things. And so he can take those teaching points and wrap them up in stories. And it certainly doesn't sound like he's talking about me, but I noticed something. That's all.
Okay, So we've got like 5 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? I have not been looking at the chat room, the chat questions. Is there anyone have specific questions or comments? No.
In case there's something I'd like to mention. Peter is going to be also. He mentioned the 3 to 3:45 program, the workshop that he's doing on covert verbal inductions and suggestions, and he's also 4 o'clock on Sunday. He's going to be teaching self-hypnosis and transformation, filling in for Ken. By the way, I hate to mention it, but I've got to. Ken Addy Ring was going to teach that class, and he has crossed over the Rainbow Bridge within the last month or so. So we're really sorry about that, and nice that Peter can step in and do self-hypnosis and transformation as well.
I think you may have the time switched around a little bit. I think I'm doing the self-hypnosis and transformation on Saturday morning or Saturday, and the Sunday afternoon thing is the 2-hour one. Be that as it may, I met Ken a couple times, had some lovely conversations with him. He was a very sweet and genuine person, and I'm going to do my best to channel him during that 45 minutes. So we'll see what comes out.
Lovely.
He will do his best to help you with that channeling too. He'll be right there with you.
You know, one of the things they talk about is deep trance modeling. And in the early days, I was teaching a class in a therapeutic facility, and I went off during a break into one of the practitioner rooms, and there, lo and behold, was a wheelchair. So I got myself in the wheelchair and wheeled myself out and did my best imitation of Milton Erickson. But they say be careful about deep trance modeling because you never know what you'll get. You might, get parts that you're not crazy about. So you might want to be a bit more selective about what you pull away, right?
Absolutely. Oh, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our time, and Peter, it's been lovely talking with you. It always is, of course, and we're looking forward to your program. So, ladies and gentlemen, do sign up for Conversational Hypnosis with Peter Blum, and be there because it's where it's going to be happening. Karen, any words of wisdom to send us out with?
I thought it was fascinating, and I do want to say that yes, Peter, you are at have a two hour at 3 o'clock on Sunday. That is true, and I haven't been able to find Ken Addy Ring's position.
It's 4 o'clock on Friday.
It is 4 o'clock on Friday.
So ordinarily I'd be worried because I'd be thinking, oh, I've got to run to my room and get all of my bowls and take them and set them up in the place where but I don't have to worry about that now because it's all right here in my living room. Right.
Don't get too used to it. We will go back to being in person soon enough. Don't get too used to it. Although he does a phenomenal job, even from a distance, it's still the same wonderful sound from Peter Blum.
Yeah. All righty. Looking forward to it.
Adios from the hippie from Woodstock. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I look forward to the day that we can all gather in person again sometime soon in the not too distant future, I hope.
You bet.
Happy trails.
Good night. See you next Monday and tomorrow night for the virtual chapter.
By the way, next Monday we're going to have Karen Han and Ashley Caputo, and who are doing pandemic problem solving. And I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. We're having Frederick Mao, and Frederick's topic is, here we go, future now, 300 milliseconds and the limits of cognitive change. So looking forward to that. See you next week. Bye-bye. Oh, tomorrow night, virtual chapter.
Yep, Maria Bird. Don't miss it.
One more thing. That was it.
Thank you, Dan.